Welcome to Tech Talks, a podcast hosted by the Rotman Commerce FinTech Association about all things business, finance, and technology. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Tech Talks podcast. We are here today with Christina Camacho, the founder and CEO of Ivy Lender, for our entrepreneurship episode of the Gender Gap in Finance and Technology series. So welcome to the podcast, Christina.
Thank you for having me.
So to start off, I guess, knowing that entrepreneurship is a difficult path and everything, can you tell us a little bit about your company, how you started it, and then what you do?
Sure. So I started my company in 2016. I was working in banking for about 10 years, and I decided that I wanted to build technology that would address a group of underserved borrowers that I was working with day to day at the bank, but unfortunately unable to help due to the gap in financing available to small businesses. I started my company at 29, so I did it before, I had too many responsibilities, family and all of that. And so I took the risk by quitting my job and starting my company. We just celebrated 5 years in business. We've had a couple of pivots along the way. We actually started as a payment processing company and pivoted into alternative lending, but we have been around, and we're in the United States is our home base, but we also have a presence in Canada. So we were brought to Montreal in 2018 for the Holt Accelerator, which is what really promoted us in the market and helped us gain exposure, as well as connecting with young talent at the universities, predominantly in Quebec. But yeah, that's our story.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't hit on what Ivy Lender does. So we are a loan marketplace. So we will sort data and match borrowers with lenders. So either traditional lenders or alternative lenders, sometimes family offices, and are predominantly focused on small business, but we're expanding into things like consumer and business credit cards, so people can actually apply and get an issued credit card right on our website. And we still offer payment processing through a partner channel. And we're looking to diversify our product offering and see how we can add value to our clients constantly.
Great. Yeah, so with your vast experience in banking, what pushed you to go out on your own to start Ivy Lender?
So I worked at a bank in Miami-Dade, and the market was, I would say, 99% male. And it was a really interesting work environment at the last bank that I was at, and I felt that we were missing the mark on a few things. I think in terms of diversity, there was just really not a lot of diversity, which did present its challenges. I think a lot of my peers treated me like I was their secretary instead of their counterpart. So there was a little bit of that pushed me to want to go out on my own and get outside of the corporate structure. But really, it was just the idea of innovating. I was always inspired by my clients and their story of success. I have had wildly successful clients that I've had the pleasure of banking in the 10 years that I was a banker. And I loved hearing the story of perseverance. And for some reason, it resonated with me before I ever took the leap. I knew one day I wanted to start something of my own. I just wasn't sure until one day I just took the leap and had enough of it and decided that this was my time.
That's really great. Thanks for sharing that. So you mentioned that like most of the workforce was male. So have you ever had any moments of like imposter syndrome, and how did you instill confidence in yourself?
I have imposter syndrome every day. So, I can tell you a couple of times where it's really been strong, the feeling of imposter syndrome. So I feel it when I'm getting awards. I feel it when people that I've never met come up to me and say they know about me, which happened at, there was actually a Women in Finance Summit in Toronto that I attended a couple years ago, and I was nominated for Women of the Year, and which that alone was a little bit of imposter syndrome. And there was some really wonderful women that came up to me that were, in terms of their demographics, they were probably 20 or 30 years my senior. Yet they came to me with just a little timidness and nervousness, and they said they had been following my career and they knew about my company and what we've been doing. And it was to me a huge compliment, number one, but it was also very much like, I feel, you can feel very beaten down as an entrepreneur, because there's a lot of failures before a success, or for every, one positive thing, there may be 20 hurdles or, obstacles that you're presented with. And that's really where the imposter syndrome comes from. And when you raise venture capital, as I do, you receive a lot of no's before you receive a yes. And that's with anyone raising venture capital, but even more so for women. Statistically, we just have it, we have to make that many more calls. And also we face a completely biased line of questioning, which you can, reference in the Harvard Business Review, that, they're more, the frame of questioning that a venture capitalist will present to a female founder is going to be more more risk tolerant questions or intolerant questions versus, like, a male can present the same pitch deck and they're going to just go solely on, projections and, ideas, and, there's a huge bias.
Yeah, there are definitely many difficulties that come with entrepreneurship. So, with that being said, what were some challenges that you faced?
Entrepreneurship has been the hardest thing I've ever done. It is a life-changing experience, and it has been, really, it has been really a testament to my resilience, because there have been challenges personally that have been a direct result of my professional challenges. It weighs on your relationships with your significant others, with your family, with your friends. And when a business doesn't take off right away, at a certain point, people around you start to doubt whether or not you are going to be able to achieve your goals. And, they can start to look down on you or become a little bit negative. And when you hear the stories of, highly successful entrepreneurs, they all have that same story, in the sense they're all, individually different, but there's that underlying tone of being resilient through hard times. And for anyone that goes into starting a business, it's not a walk in the park. I mean, I guess there's a few and far between that have a business handed to them where they hit the jackpot from day one. But for the most part, there's statistically going to be a life cycle that will start off pretty hard. But if you stick it out, you can learn a lot about yourself, and you can teach others around you and guide them with your experience to make it a little bit easier for the next incoming group of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's really great. So, going back a little bit now to how you were talking about venture capital and, how it's harder for women, especially when they're trying to raise venture capital. Can you share a little bit more about your experience there, how you were able to kind of overcome some of the challenges maybe that you were faced with?
Yeah, I mean, I still have challenges, right? So I've given over 600 pitches to venture capitalists in North America, so in the U.S. and Canada. And one would think that I would have raised a ton of money with that many conversations, and I haven't. I've had to sustain my business through bootstrapping. We do have a family office on our cap table that is one of our investors. They believed in us early on. They, put us through their accelerator in 2018, which is what brought us to Montreal. And, that was our positive experience with venture capital. However, with women, you almost have to be on the verge of really taking off before people take you serious, versus, napkin ideas in Silicon Valley, where, some people are getting massive checks on a pie in the sky valuation, pre-money valuation, and idea that may or may not work. So, it's the only thing I can say to that is that even though we haven't received a tremendous amount of venture capital backing to date, we have been in a position through COVID to keep our operations lean and to sustain through an economic downturn, because we've had to rely on self-funding for all of these years, and we now have investors swarming us with the success that we've accomplished internationally and domestically, and what we've done with virtually no venture capital backing. So we're going into a new position with what has happened through COVID, where we are picking who we partner with moving forward. So right now, I have no shortage of investors post COVID, or post this pandemic, because we've done a lot this past year when everyone else was hurting or having, all these venture-backed companies that had all this high overhead, the fancy offices with the beer on tap and the bicycles and all of that. We didn't have all of those luxuries. And so we've been scaling during COVID while everyone else has been shutting down or getting acquired.
Yeah, it's great that you share that, because I think it's important to kind of show that other aspect of entrepreneurship and how it's not always just like, you go venture capital, everything's all successful, and there's different ways to be successful in a business and, raise funding. So yeah, we really appreciate how you're able to share your story. So when you first started Ivy Lenders, then how did you build credibility so that businesses would come to you for support in relation to business loans and that area?
So we've had a couple of different ways that we've been able to penetrate the market without funding. 99% of our business is referral based. We get referrals directly from payment processors across the U.S. We partner with roughly 60 payment processors. Each of them have a portfolio of a couple hundred to a couple thousand clients, and they're already the financial advisor to those clients. So when those clients are looking for working capital, usually they go to their bank or to their processor secondary to see what options are available. So we do not acquire clients like the other fintechs where we just buy raw data. We actually have, just one removed connection between our borrowers and us. So they're all warm introductions.
Yeah, that's really great. So throughout your career, you've accomplished quite a bit. As you said earlier, you've been named the 40 under 40 game changer in the payment space and the first out of 50 most influential founders in the world by Harrington Star. So what would you say is the biggest factor to being able to achieve and push your career forward and be able to have these achievements? What would you say has been like one of the biggest factors to your success?
Resilience. So hard work, determination, believing in my team and our product, in our company, our vision, and really just toughing out the hard times and not letting anyone stop me. And sometimes that includes personal relationships. And that can be a very hard thing for women, especially when you're in love and you are wanting to build a family. When you own a business, it has, and if you want to be successful, it really has to be everything to you. And that includes sacrificing time that others are too selfish to do, quite frankly. People that are 9-to-5ers, they clock in and clock out and they leave their work at home or at the office, I mean, and with a founder, it doesn't stop for you. It's 24/7. It could be in the middle of a holiday that you have one of your biggest clients having an issue that needs to be resolved, and your family has to, take a back seat. And so that can be really challenging for women, especially because we're so used to juggling family and business. But I think a work-life balance is something that is challenging for any founder, not just specific to a gender. It's always a challenge. If you look at the statistics of the divorce rates of entrepreneurs, it's pretty high, because it's typically hard to understand a founder's mindset and commitment. It's something really only founders understand among one another.
Definitely, I think resilience is definitely one of the most important characteristics of an entrepreneur. So, like along your journey, what mistakes have you made like along the way? And what advice would you have for others who want to set off in a similar direction?
So some of the mistakes that I've made have been um, jumping into partnerships with people or jumping into hiring specific people. I think that when you are starting out, the things that are exciting to you are maybe not necessarily the things that make the most sense for your business. I don't know how to say that without giving an example of what I've done wrong, but I look back at the last 5 years and I've done a lot of things wrong. And if those things hadn't happened, I wouldn't have become a better founder or operator. And so they can be painful in the moment, but what's important is learning to not make that mistake again, whatever challenge is presented. And I think that another issue that can arise is when you're starting out and you are constrained with cash, you may want to involve friends as employees. And that can really hurt a business because when you have a connection to someone emotionally, it can be very challenging to detach that friendship or even if it's a family member. And if they're hurting your business, you need to be able, with any employee, to cut it off immediately for the betterment of your company. And as a founder, when you are self-funded, you're reaching out for cheap labor or as many resources as you can get for as little as possible. And so I think that that is a big mistake that I made where I mixed business and pleasure. Advice to future founders, follow your dreams and don't give up. And we can be our worst enemy, our biggest doubters. And, it's, you're just one idea away from changing your life. And I think that there's nothing more rewarding than seeing an idea that comes out of your brain become a product or a service that someone uses. It's really like nothing else.
That's awesome. And it's really great advice that you give as well. So now moving into I saw that you were quite passionate about the advancement of women in the community. You've been involved in the Junior League of Greater Fort Lauderdale, and then the Women's Network in Electronic Transitions. Is there a story behind these involvements, and what made you want to become so involved in, gender equality, the advancement of women?
So I think it's really important for women to help other women break the glass ceiling. There's so much room for advancement of women that still exists. There's still a gap, and in the workforce and really anything in all areas of life, really. And the generation above me and the generation above them had a really hard path of getting to the top. And a lot of those women are threatened by younger women coming in, more beautiful women, more smarter women, more talented women that have a new, skill set that they may not have. And sometimes those senior women can actually be the biggest critics of future generations. And I've experienced it myself. And I'm committed to not being that kind of founder or, influencer on the next generation. I know how hard I've worked to get to where I am. And I know how important it is to have a mentor that can help you get that in that path. So, two women in my life have made a huge impact on me, and there's been a shift that has happened since they came into my life. So, my first hiring manager, I followed her 3 separate times at banks before going out on my own. She makes a lot of money at a corporate bank. And my dream has been to have her come work as a senior level, executive at my company. And she has told me now, since everything that I've been through with entrepreneurship, how she looks up to me and how I have not outgrown her, but done things that she never had the guts to do. So I still look at her in the eyes of the 22-year-old that first started working my first corporate job working for her. And she inspired me and I always looked up to her, but now she looks up to me in a way, and it's a little bit of the imposter syndrome, right? But that woman who I worked for that, all those times has never her ability to train me and to believe in me at such a young age and to develop me and to expose me to things that she did at such a young age never changed. Is something that I've never taken for granted. And that's something I hope to be able to replicate for multiple women. I then had a mentor through the Electronic Payments Association you mentioned, and she, I reached out to the head of the organization and I said, "Look, I think I'm in over my head. I started this company. When you start a company, there's no manager to tell you what to do, and that seems very liberating, but it also can be pretty scary." and and so I ended up asking the organization if there was a senior woman that would be willing to take me under her wing and just bounce ideas off of her and just kind of keep me in check, right? As a green founder. And that is why I want to give back, because women like that have, dedicated themselves to really breaking down the barriers. And so many women are still not doing that. I can tell you stories of women that have humiliated me in pitches and held me back, and I've seen both sides of it, and I just want to be on the side of inspiring others.
Yeah, I think having a mentor these days is really important for
Yeah.
like personal growth and stuff, to see how other people are like living their life and see what you can learn from them. So on that note, how did you build these relationships with your mentors?
So, like I mentioned, that one organization, I reached out to the executive director, asked, is there a senior woman that's in my space that has experienced some of the things that I'm coming into or currently going through that'd be willing to mentor me? And I got connected to her through the executive director. I actually live a couple miles down the street from her now. At the time, I lived in Florida and she lived in Atlanta. So I moved up to Atlanta to be closer to her and to, be in the payments epicenter. But, to have someone like that, uh, it's really crucial. I think it's crucial at any stage, even if you're not a founder. But the more successful you become, there's a saying, it's very lonely at the top. It's extremely lonely to be a founder, and to not have a support system around you that understand what you're putting yourself through.
Yeah, that's really important because when it comes to, business and everything, relationships are quite important. And so I like how you highlight these things about, finding a mentor, the importance of that because yeah, entrepreneurship can be pretty lonely. So that's really great. Um, Also, how you mentioned there were some people who held you back. How did you overcome this and like find a strength within yourself to keep going and, hold yourself and persevere even though there's people that are trying to hold you back?
You just got to cut those people out and move on, and just try to be your biggest cheerleader at the times of doubt. I I had a very successful woman humiliate me at a competition. I flew into New York. I was living in Montreal at the time, and I flew in to give a pitch at this, uh, fintech, challenge, if you will. It was about 40 companies. There was two female founders out of 40 male-led companies. And this woman stood up, and she was the head of one of the largest funds in the world. And as soon as she stood up and she introduced herself, I was immediately impressed with her, inspired by her, wanted to meet her, wanted to get to know her. And, I gave my pitch and I nailed it because I've just mentioned I've given hundreds of pitches. I've gone through accelerators. I've gone through like intensive training on delivery of speeches and all of that. And this woman, she, at the end of my pitch, just rips me to shreds to the point where it was almost embarrassing to walk out of that office. I had 5 emails by the time I got to the airport apologizing on behalf of that woman. And really, the only reason she did it was, you know, I don't really know. I still don't know, but that still kind of sits with me because the level of respect that I gave her when she stood up as someone who paved the way for us, for you, for me, and that, I mean, she ran the one of the largest funds in the world, innovation for, this. If I told you the name, you'd be like, wow. And it was hard. It still is hard. I have not gotten over that because I just want to never, ever make a woman feel the way that she made me feel that day.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Your resilience is really inspiring, especially along your entrepreneurship journey. I'm sure a lot of listeners will agree. And so thank you so much for sharing that. To wrap up, our last question for you is, what does success mean to you?
Success for me means having a positive impact on my borrowers and my employees. So, really running a company where people are proud to work with me, they're proud to work and be a part of the company, and they're happy to make a difference on a small business's day-to-day life and help them pursue their dreams with a little bit of relief and working capital.
Thank you so much again for coming on to the podcast today, Christina. It was really great to hear your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Tech Talks. We'll see you in the next one.